Welcome to Meet the Candidates here on WCMU. I'm David Nicholas, and our guest is Kristen McDonald Rivet, the Democratic candidate for Michigan's newly drawn 35th Senate District. This is including Saginaw, Midland, and Bay counties, and the connecting townships for those cities. Kristen, thanks very much for being with us. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
In our first moment or two, a little bit then about you, your hometown, and the experience you bring to this campaign.
Sure. So I am a resident of beautiful Bay City. I serve as a city commissioner here. I'm in my first term doing that. This is actually my first time running for a partisan office, but I do have 30 years of experience working in public policy. So that is a particular expertise I bring to the job. I am the mom and stepmom of 6 kids. My husband and I raised a pile of kids together. 5 of them are adults, and we now are just have a middle school boy living at home. I have spent most of my world has been around public policy related to children and particular working on childcare and early education. Was really fortunate early in my career. I received an appointment from Governor Jennifer Granholm to work with her children's cabinet and I was one of the architects of the early childhood system in Michigan. It's called Great Start, and was able to do that and build on that. Went from there to be the chief of staff at the State Department of Education. Spent about a decade in Detroit working on behalf of children at a foundation, and most recently ran a network of community centers in Midland, which is one of the largest nonprofits in the region.
Roots in Bay City then, but obviously familiar with that whole area of the Tri-Cities, including Midland and Saginaw. As you've been campaigning for this potential Senate office, what are the voters telling you are the key issues, and what are some of the proposals then that you would take to Lansing to address those top issues?
Sure. I'm glad you asked me that question. This week, we will have hit our 40,000th door in this campaign since I announced in February. So we have talked to quite a lot of people. The region is one that what we hear predominantly is bread and butter kitchen table issues. So we know across the state, 6 in 10 jobs pay less than $47,000 a year. But in our region, that number is closer to 75% of our jobs. And it's really evident when I'm talking with folks on their doorstep. They're very concerned about the lack of high wage jobs in the region. They're concerned about the population loss, which is greater in our region than any other area of the state. A lot of people talking to me about wanting to work on our local economy so that we can watch our kids grow here, but also watch our kids stay here when they become adults, so and be able to form their own lives and be able to thrive both economically and just in general. So what that really comes down to are the issues that why I ran for this. What we're launching in the campaign is talking about strong and stable schools, being able to build our talent base and increase our population by creating more high paying jobs. Of course, protecting our natural resources, really top of mind for a lot of people. And then honestly, what we are hearing a lot about since June is the protection of reproductive rights and other things that folks have taken for granted for many decades. So that's a hot topic on the doors as well.
Well, let's start with that then as a follow-up, and obviously this comes as a result of the Supreme Court decision on Roe v. Wade. What then can be addressed at the state level as the debate continues over Michigan's 1931 law and moving forward as to how Michigan will be treated in terms of the status of abortion rights or the abortion access in the state?
Well, the interesting thing that I mean, there are a lot of repercussions of the Dobbs decision, but one of the things that I think the whole country is waking up to now is the critical importance of state legislators. And the state legislature. So many things are now being pushed to the state level to make decisions. So it's both protection of reproductive rights, but protection of marriage rights, the right to contraception, some of those pieces, as well as the right to have an unobstructed access to the ballot box, being able to exercise our right to vote. So there are fundamental rights that are now sitting in the state legislature, which makes it a really important to get involved and know. So I'm so glad that you're doing this, to know who is actually running for these races. From a reproductive rights standpoint, there's always been conversation about abortion rights in political campaigns. But quite honestly, it was mostly done in the theoretical. People declared a side. I'm either pro-life or I'm pro-choice, and it's kind of stuck to that. But when you talk to folks on the doors, and when you're talking to people just in community, right? Whether you're at the grocery store or whether you're at church, most people are on a spectrum. There's a point where they're comfortable, and then there's a point where they're decidedly not comfortable, and that spectrum moves for folks. What overwhelmingly people in this district do not want is an extreme view on that. So what we are hearing, and where I land, is that we need to codify the rights and protections we had under Roe. The 1931 law is very extreme. It precludes access to an abortion immediately after conception. It puts doctors and nurses in jail, and it forces rape and incest victims to carry babies to term. That is out of step with where most people in the district are. So it's a really tough issue, but it's one that I think is really important, that we bring folks together to have a conversation about it, that we have middle of the road policy, and that we make sure that our reproductive rights are protected.
If we look a little bit more closely at the economic and education concerns that you also address that the voters are telling you, you noted 75% have less than the annual wage of $45,000 per year and a higher population loss. How do you put a stop to that? What are your proposals? Should you go to Lansing in terms of how that economic base, that economic diversity, economic climate is stabilized to begin to hold people into the area and also to raise the wages for the jobs that are hopefully going to be available if that economic situation improves?
Yep. It's a great question. And it should be the top of mind question for anyone making policy in Michigan right now. So we know that the way that that people prosper and that states economically prosper is to have a large, thriving middle class. So our tax policy, our economic policy really needs to be centered around seeing that median income in Michigan increase. The year that I was born, which was 1970, which I want points for really revealing my age as a 52-year-old woman. The year I was born, Michigan had one of the highest median incomes in the country. This was a place where we had a very large middle class, and I can remember many of my father worked construction. Many of my friends' parents worked on the line in GM, and it was instilled in me from the moment I was little, that if you got up every day and you worked really hard, that you were going to be able to turn that into opportunity. It meant that you could own a home, raise your kids, save for retirement, every once in a while head to Disney World, right? That's what that used to be in Michigan. But we have seen prosperity in Michigan drop as the middle class has shrunk, and as opportunity and job wages have fallen. That's not true everywhere. If you look to Minnesota, that has spent a lot of their economic policy thinking about how to support a thriving middle class. So as an example, when you're looking at tax policy, rather than proposing an income tax reduction that will give a very small sliver of tax relief across the board to everyone in the state, we need to be focusing tax cuts at the working class, at the folks that are in that wage space, that they get a little bit more money in their pocket. When middle class families have purchasing power in the economy, everybody does well. We have to figure out how to support small business in a stronger way. That's those entrepreneurs, those folks, those are the lifeblood of our economy, and most of us work for a small business. So there are places that we can work toward, but the really big shift we need to be able to do is to think about how we create places where people want to live and stay. And so that starts with basics like safety and public transportation, but it also is about amenities and things that that folks want to be around, walkable communities where people want to really want to move and stay. So we have to think about talent concentrations in local communities. We have to think about tax policy that supports the middle class, and then we have to be able to have an education system that is preparing folks for the knowledge economy as opposed to the manufacturing economy of old.
Briefly then, is this something, or all of these points, something that can be done simultaneously, or do you have a sense of a step-by-step priority 1, 2, 3 to get us to that goal of what you say you would like to see economically?
Wouldn't life be wonderful if policy worked in that sequential way and it could just move in an orderly fashion? The mom in me loves loves the lines of that. But honestly, these are things that we need to think about as and move them down the road simultaneously. And the transition to a knowledge-based economy, right? So jobs that cannot be done by robots. That's the direction of the economy. We know the world is headed that way. We know Michigan is headed that way. That takes substantial investment in the public infrastructure in order to make that shift, and it needs to be sustained over a long period of time. So, excuse me, as we are thinking about how we're structuring our schools, we have I'm a big supporter of the skilled trades. I'm a big supporter of creating pathways for kids, but we too often are preparing our uh, poor children for their first job that is often automated 10 years down the road and they have to switch jobs. But we're preparing affluent kids for lifelong careers. All of our kids need to be prepared for lifelong careers, which means they need to be able to be have exposed to all kinds of different options and have a strong base of educational knowledge that will carry them through as they move from place to place in their throughout the course of their lives. So it used to be that there was this analogy around climbing the corporate ladder. You climb the career ladder, you move from one rung of the ladder up. Well, the reality is that the true analogy now, as we're launching people into the world of work, is more like climbing a rock wall. You move up. Sometimes you move lateral, but you're moving across sectors and across jobs. And that's how we have to prepare our kids in the education system. So it's investing in all of those things at the same time and doing it with a sense of urgency.
In those last 30 seconds that we have, then, the last message you would like to leave for voters as they get set to go to the polls.
The big thing that I would like to say is that I know that the political system feels very messy and very discouraging right now, but we don't have to have a political system like this. We can come together. Our politics don't have to be divisive. We can reject the political games of old or that are happening all across the state right now, and we can pass an agenda and elect candidates that will work for working families. And that's the kind of state senator I will be.
We wish you best of luck with the rest of the campaign, and thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Our guest has been Kristen McDonald Rivet, the Democratic candidate for Michigan's 35th Senate District. I'm David Nicholas for Meet the Candidates, and remember to go out and cast your vote on November 8th. All qualifying candidates were invited to participate in this series. Following the redraw of Michigan House, Michigan Senate, and congressional districts, check with local officials to make sure you are properly registered. Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th.